You can never have too many outlets, and that is the scenario I'm facing today. I have an outlet about 4 feet away from my corner, and I want to place a table back in that corner because this is an Airbnb that I'll be listing soon, and I want to have a little charging station back there. So I'm going to run you through the full process, but specifically for this one, what if you do not have attic access or access to a basement or crawl space like this where you could run Romex down over to your new location and then up to your old work box. Don't worry, it is still a completely doable DIY project for those of us that are comfortable doing electrical work on our own homes. And then how do we keep this an electrical project and not a drywall or painting project? There is a little trick to that, so stay tuned and I'll show you how to minimize the number of tools and supplies you'll need. First up, grab a utility knife and score the caulk line between the trim and the wall surface. Then a recommendation by you guys, I got a Zenith trim puller and I wanted to test it out because this is supposed to be the best way to pull trim without damaging your wall. I do have to admit it is pretty awesome and will be in my regular rotation. Then you can just carefully pull the trim off the wall and watch, there's probably a toenail fastener right at the end, so you can use a little leverage and pluck it off without damaging the trim. And then instead of knocking the nails out, I just use end snips. And I'll snip those nails off, keeping that outside surface from damage. So as you can see, the trim still looks great and will be very easy to reinstall. So first I'll remove the faceplate of the outlet that will pull power from. And the quote unquote trick that we're gonna do is any drywall that we open up is gonna be below the trim that we just removed. So when we reinstall it, it hides any of our cut lines. My trim is 3.5 inches off the floor, so my cut line, cutting open the drywall, is gonna be at 3.25 to make sure it's hidden by the trim once it goes back on the wall. And then usually when you take your faceplate off, you can look in there and see where your studs are at, or I just use a magnet stud finder. That's the most common stud finder that I use. And it doesn't find the studs, it finds the fasteners on the studs. So just attached to a screw that's holding the drywall on the wall. So that means that I have a stud on this side that I'm gonna have to go through. I'm gonna need to get my Romex through that stud, and then I can go offset, find the next fastener, and then confirm that I have 16 inches between studs. That's the most common stud spacing, and that's 16 inches on center. That means from the center point of each stud, they're spaced 16 inches. So knowing that there's 16-inch space, I can take the distance between my current outlet location and where I want to go. I see that is a little over 48 inches, so I know I'll have the first stud at the outlet, second stud here, third stud at 32 inches from the outlet, and then fourth stud at 48, and then I will be installing an old work box in the middle of 2 studs. All right, so now let's cut open some drywall. The tool of choice is going to be the oscillating tool, which works great for these type of cuts. And then I made a small 1x block, which is 3.25 inches tall, which is right on my cut line. Then I just work my oscillating tool across the cut line. And once I get to the end, I can use that block to make a nice 90-degree cut. I'll do one more pass here, just making sure it's completely cut through all along the way, and then clean up with the shop vac. Then what you'll want to do is remove any fasteners, nails like I have, or maybe screws. I'm just using a 12-inch cat's paw to carefully remove those fasteners and make sure I don't damage the floor. Here's an example, just prying the nail out slightly and then starting to work it away from the wall so it frees up that drywall. I always try to remove this as one piece. If I've broken 2, that's not the end of the world. In this case, it's working free, and I'm able to actually remove it all as one piece and then do a final cleanup. So let's get our new location. We'll mark it 11.5 inches off the floor and make sure the box is level. 11.5 inches will match the other outlets in the home, so it'll look consistent. I'll outline that old work box and then cut it out with that same oscillating tool, taking my time not to overcut. Once you get that cut out, now we'll go back to the existing outlet that we want to pull power from. So I'll confirm no power, and then I'll remove the outlet. And then the way we'll get into this metal electrical box is from the bottom. So I'll go ahead and remove the knockout from the bottom of the box. Now for drilling through the studs, I'm just going to use a Diablo extension with a 1-inch spade bit. What I'm trying to do is actually get up under in the middle of the stud, but actually place the 1-inch hole above where the trim's going to go. Why do I do that? Because I'll be fastening the trim with brad nails in each of the studs, so I want to ensure that those brad nails have no chance of piercing the Romex, which will help us avoid any issues. So running the new wire's really straightforward. I'm just gonna go from my new hole, and then I'll go down and then start feeding through these studs. Now this is where some people take a shortcut, and you should not. We have our non-metallic that's gonna go up through the bottom of our metal box. You should not just run your non-metallic through that hole without some type of connector. Well, sometimes it's hard to get a connector in there because you have limited access. So what I do, I give myself plenty of extra, and then I go ahead and pre-install the connector, taking the nut off of it, but screwing down the connector on the non-metallic Romex. So now we have our connector on, and we can feed our wire up into our box. Then you can pull your wire through, and you'll see you get to your connector. Then bring the nut over the Romex. So now we got that connector in place, plenty of Romex, and it's protected coming up through that metal box. So wiring is really straightforward on this one. On that existing outlet, I went with a pigtail setup where I ran pigtails to the old outlet and then back to my Wago 221 lever nuts, which you know are my go-to for wire connectors. I have this Milwaukee pack out setup, which has all my standard components that I use on a very regular basis. And this continually saves me trips to the hardware store. Now, I'm not necessarily expecting DIYers to build a setup like this, but you might want to over time. And if you need a reference as you're building out your own kit, check down in the description, you'll see my Amazon store. This has all my recommendations on there, including in the electrical section, you will see a few different starter kits for Wago lever nuts. Those are by far the most common things that people buy from our Amazon store. And I literally have never heard a complaint of somebody trying Wago 221 lever nuts and not liking them. So we'll roll through the wiring here. That is my new Romex coming in. I'll strip off the 12 gauge and also trim up the old wires coming in, because all I'll be doing is going straight into these Wago 221 3-pin lever nuts and then pulling out a pigtail, and that pigtail will go directly into our old outlet. So I'll have hot, neutral, and ground. Ground will go into the 3-pin. And then I will actually J-hook that ground, because that will not go straight in. That will go clockwise around the green screw terminal. So we'll tighten that up. And this one is a commercial grade, so it'll go straight in the back, but that is not speed wiring or what's called backstabbing. That is actually back wiring, which pulls a plate and pinches that wire. So it's a very secure hold. So we'll mount the outlet and finish off with our cover plate. Then we'll take our old work box at the new location and make sure those tabs actually tighten on the back of the drywall. Sometimes you tighten those up and they actually don't squeeze on the back of the drywall. Strip off our new 12 gauge, put a J-hook in the ground, clockwise around the screw terminal, and then same thing. This is a commercial grade, so we use back wiring and go straight in. Then we'll just mount everything up. Make sure it's straight and not crooked. Tighten it up, and then we'll finish off with our cover plate. And be consistent, have your cover plate screws either horizontal or vertical. So I'm gonna button everything up, but first, I got the power back on, confirming we got power to our old outlet. And let's see how we're doing on our new one. Yes, so we're good. So I put some painter's tape on the wall just to mark all the studs for my reference. Then I'm just gonna use a single drywall screw at each of these studs to hold that piece of drywall that we had removed, and the cat's paw just to press it up against the other drywall. Once that's in there, I'll put the trim piece back in. Remember, the trim piece didn't have any damage, so I'll just use 2 brad nails each stud location to secure it. And then this is what the finished product looks like. Pretty solid, if you ask me. So the last step would just be a little bit of caulking at the seam and then just covering each of those brad nail holes. But to be honest, I'm pretty much an amateur when it comes to caulking trim. I can do it, but I'm not awesome. So I will hand you off to the professional, Ryan, who has a channel called The Funny Carpenter. He is the master at this, and he has a ton of awesome tips and tricks on how to make caulking trim much easier and much less mess. So thanks for stopping by, and we'll catch you on that next video. Take care.